Summer's finally here. That means school's over and it's time to pick a game to just chill out and de-stress with. But it's gotta be something fun, something addicting, something that's gonna keep me going through it. But the question is, which game to pick? Maybe a classic like Tomba. Shoot! You know, I think I'm looking for something a little more puzzling to the mind rather than the reflexes. So let's see what else we can find. What about Catherine? Atlas never ceases to amaze me.
Damn it! I'm dying here, I'm so close!
May you rest in peace.
Well shit, that was even harder than the last one. Isn't there a decent fun puzzle game here anywhere? Of course, that's it!
Oh no. Oh no. I remember this game.
John, you should play this game. It's really good.
Oh, is it? Hey Nick, why don't you just press start?
John,
What's going on? I
think the game's playing itself, John.
No. It is. It's like the game is playing itself.
Oh no.
Oh my god. What? Oh my god. Oh my god.
This game's really bad.
Nah, I'm just kidding, of course. The game we're actually going to be looking at is far less traumatic. Fire and Ice on Nintendo.
Fire and Ice, because it was the 90s and the N made it cool, is a puzzle game as well as the prequel to Solomon's Key. It's known as Solomon's Key 2 everywhere outside of the US. It was a late release by Tecmo, coming out March 11th, 1993, just less than a year away from the end of the NES's life cycle. At the time, they had seen some success with hits like Ninja Gaiden and Tecmo Bowl, so being that Solomon's Key was a fairly successful arcade game, which saw a port to the NES in 1987, its prequel was an obvious choice for a follow-up release. As you may have guessed, this led to poor sales, especially coupled with the fact that it was released in such limited quantities, given that the SNES was now dominating the market. In the excitement and heat of the console wars, gems like this often flew under the radar. It's a shame that one of the best puzzle games out there, with some of the most addicting, challenging, and brain-teasing gameplay, never had its chance to become a true classic. Even the box itself sports a warning label claiming that there are highly addictive logic puzzles within, and to use caution and restraint. The story of this game isn't too deep, but for its time, it's completely understandable. Basically, Dana, a young wizard, is granted the power to create ice blocks by the winter fairies of Coolmint Island, so that he can help stop the evil Druidel from melting the island. Also, Druidel kidnapped a girl and her little sister, who are basically the damsels in distress for that "dude, save your girl" message that most classic NES games had. I also like how the story is being told by a grandmother to her grandkids, like it's a fable or a storybook. It's a nice touch. The gameplay itself is a ton of fun, as it's easy to pick up and learn the mechanics. Quite simply, your objective is to put out the fire enemies using the blocks of ice, which our hero Dana, very manly name by the way, can create in an empty slot below him or diagonally. Blocks can connect to walls or other ice blocks, and if there's nothing connecting the block, it will fall until it hits the ground. The block pushing mechanic reminds me a lot of Catherine, but on a 2D plane rather than a 3D one, and I wouldn't be surprised if there was some inspiration taken from here. There are also blocks arranged in certain patterns at the start of each level, and it's these variations that keep the gameplay fresh and always interesting. While it starts off very easy, the levels past World 4 get deceptively and progressively harder. A good tip is to always keep altitude on the opponent, because if Dana traps himself below and can't reclaim his footing, then you'll have to restart the level in order to slay that particular fireball. This is where the challenge exists, finding a way to not get stuck while at the same time getting to the enemy and then reaching a vantage point by which you can kill it with ice. While there are a total of 100 levels spread across 10 worlds, which you can do in any order you choose, it's more feasible to just do the levels in order, especially if you're a new player. The game does a solid job of building on its own mechanics through its gameplay, and constantly stumps you with new, mind-bending obstacles for how to traverse each stage and reach each enemy. Oftentimes, when pushing blocks around, you'll get stuck in a corner with no way to back up. Luckily, there are no pesky lives or continues to worry about. Simply hit start and try again, with the only punishment being starting the level fresh. And hey, if the level you're on is infuriating to you, just exit and try a different stage. Since you choose the stage order, you also choose to take on the more challenging levels when you want. On top of that, there's a password system that can be accessed at any time from the map screen by simply pressing B to back out. The passwords aren't too long, and it's a great addition considering that this is a pretty lengthy NES title, and you won't likely be beating it in one sitting. At the end of each world, there's a boss fight, which is usually just a bigger puzzle to solve, often with lava chasing you upwards. These stages are unique, and for the most part feel very rewarding, and vastly more challenging than the regular stages. There's even some levels where the stage cycles vertically, and the player has to adapt and use this to their advantage. Those were some of my favorite stages because they really pushed you to think ahead and leave gaps for yourself when you're climbing upward again from the bottom. The final boss is a tad anticlimactic, as he's pretty easy when you know how, and he only takes 5 hits, but he was a pretty cool addition nonetheless. Also, once you beat the game, there's 50 more levels and a sound test that can be unlocked. There's even a stage editor that allows for customized levels, but much like Excitebike, these cannot be saved. It's still a neat thing to have, and there's definitely a lot of bonus content here. They certainly aren't lying when they say this game is addicting though, and it puts players into a zen sort of mood. The first 4 worlds gave me a warm feeling, and the first time I played them, it was clear to me that I had to pick up this game as soon as possible. Oftentimes, I lose track of hours of time because I simply couldn't put this game down. One of this game's, and most puzzle games, biggest strengths is making the player feel that knowledge-induced satisfaction of finally figuring out a puzzle after serious trial and error. Beating a level is generally super satisfying because I was finally able to have that aha moment and execute the perfect solution. There's nothing quite like the feeling of when everything just falls into place. It reminds me of my experience with Catherine and how certain puzzles in that game drove me nuts until I finally cracked the code and solved it. This does, however, bring up the biggest downfall to this game, the fact that the internet makes this challenging and satisfying glory ride to a cheap cakewalk that becomes boring and repetitive due to the corrupt game facts and YouTube playthroughs. It's a morality issue that stands out here more than in most games. It's like having the answers to the test, or being spoiled for a big plot twist in a movie. I will admit I did have to use these on occasion to make it through, but I always tried to figure out the solution prior to looking it up because it's no fun to mindlessly slog through such an inventive puzzler. In defense of these playthroughs, they did help me make the game less frustrating at points and made it easier to navigate some of the more obscure methods of completing certain ridiculous levels, and in that light, I owe me beating pieces of this game to them. One YouTuber in particular, MMDE, was a godsend. Also, I can tell he's got a good taste in obscure games because he has Tomba as his profile picture, and he also did a full playthrough of the game as well. Visually, the game is rather stunning, and I love all the animations on the enemies and Dana. There's even a gag where if you leave the game unpaused for more than 10 seconds without moving, Dana will fall asleep until you make a move. It doesn't affect anything, but it's cute, and it's touches like these that make games stand out. Not to mention the well-drawn art, which lent a dynamic feel to scenes like the opening prologue. All the bosses are really well detailed too, and there's all sorts of variety like a magician, a griffin, a troll, a dragon, and the creepy final boss wizard, Gerudal. While none of them really do anything to stand out, their designs are really neat, and they all have solid animation as well. The only gripe I have with the visuals is the lack of change in levels. The map screen boasts forests, caves, mountains, palaces, mines, and even a volcano, and while the backgrounds do at least change color scheme and patterns, they don't truly reflect the areas they promise. In this sense, the worlds sort of blend together for me, and it seems like a missed opportunity to have all the worlds pop with their own unique flair. Still, what's here is good, and the aesthetic feel doesn't disappoint. The soundtrack on display has some really memorable pieces, while others are just okay. Overall, the quality of the sound is great.
Despite its late release, Fire and Ice was actually featured in issue number 49 of Nintendo Power with a short walkthrough of some of the more challenging levels.
While it never got a full review back then, critics now are considerably kind to this game. Most understand its complicated and brilliant gameplay and can truly appreciate this underlooked title. It is unfortunate that it is shot up to almost $150 for a cart, as only a year ago I obtained mine for $80. Given that it's one of the top 50 rarest NES games out there, it's a must-own for any serious collector. For a modest collector, I recommend checking out the ROM first, and if you fall in love with it like I did, then consider picking up the real deal. According to some people, it's not worth it, but I think it's more dependent on what kind of collector you are, and if it means enough to you to purchase it or not.
This truly is a special game, and not only is it one of the best puzzle games ever, but it's also one of the definitive puzzle experiences on NES. With great, inventive, challenging, and brain-teasing gameplay, as well as excellent music and visuals, with a steep but rewarding learning curve, it's an extremely fun gem. I consider this game a must-play for the NES. So anyways, until next time, this has been JZNES saying keep it classic, and stick around for more reviews and underrated games.